Okay, we have a lot of people. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon to those who are here with me on the East Coast of America, and to all of those who are in other places of the world, welcome as well. My name's Judy Friedman-Kadish, and I am the Director of Americans for a Safe Israel. And we are very, very thrilled to have as our co-sponsors today the Canadian Anti-Semitism and Education Foundation. So thank you to you for joining, wherever you're joining from. And we have a very exciting program today. It's something that we've kind of had to change things over time, because since we planned this, the landscape of the education of the political landscape has undergone such changes that I think we're going to have to just kind of ebb and flow with what we have. But luckily, we have someone who is expert in many different areas, Mordechai Kedar, who is a revered speaker and a professor at Bar-Ilan University, involved with the Begin-Sadat Center, involved with so many things, and really a very, very respected commentator on all things political and all things having to do with the Middle East and Arab affairs. And so, Mordechai, we are so happy that you're with us today, and I am going to let you take it from here. I hope that we can have you speak for about 45 minutes, and then Helene Fragman-Abramson has joined us to field the questions that come in on the chat box, and she will pose those questions to you so that I can pay full attention to what you're saying, and she will help out with that. So without further ado, Mordechai Kedar, it's your game.
Thank you so much, Judy. And I thank AFSI, Americans for Safe Israel, a great organization. And as much as I saw, there are some other organizations which are involved, like the ZOA. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, of course, everybody here. And I would like to speak about two arenas. One is the domestic Israeli one, and the other one is what happens around Israel. Because there is a connection between the two arenas, of course, and the news are on both, and it's interconnected. And when I try to speak about what happens in Israel, I remember my late mother. She was a Polish mother, and I survived a Polish mother. And she, she had her Polish jokes. One day in the beginning of the 80s, I started to study at Bar-Ilan, and I took major Arabic and minor political science. Now in Hebrew, political sciences, you say Mada'ei Medina, the science of the state. This is how you say it in Hebrew. So when she asked me, what are you going to study? So I said, Arabic and science of the state. So she says, Avad, darf me wissen, wie soll ich führen an arabische Medine. Means in English, it was in Yiddish. Of course, you have to know how to run an Arab country, an Arab state. Okay? Arabic and Mada'ei Medina. This is the joke which she made out of the combination of Arabic and the science of the state. Ladies and gentlemen, when I look today at the Israeli domestic arena, it reminds me of my mother's joke, because what we see today is the turbulence of the Israeli parties which actually reminds me of the Arab countries, like Syria or others. Of course, we don't shoot at each other. We don't burn each other as they do, or blow up each other as they do in Iraq or in other Arab countries. But the emotions, which you can see here in Israel, are no less than what you see around us. What I mean is as follows. For the last 24 years, since 1996, actually almost 25 years, we had one prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, except for a little while Ehud Barak, and another little while Ariel Sharon. But Netanyahu was almost through the whole 25 years a prime minister. In Israel, we can do it because in Israel, the prime minister is not restricted to 2 terms as it is in other countries like the United States of America. Here he can be in power until his last breath, and maybe after this as well. However, because of the Israeli system, Netanyahu kept being elected again and again because of the fact that the Likud, unlike the Labour Party, the Likud is loyal to its leader. And since the leader was successful through all these years, so again and again, Netanyahu was chosen by the Likud to be at the head of the Likud. And since the Likud is the biggest party in Israel, so the head of the Likud, which is Netanyahu, is the prime minister since 1996, except for the 2 short terms of Barak and Ariel Sharon. And look, 25 years means like more than a third of the life of the state. One man was the prime minister. So in some senses, people equate the name of Israel with Netanyahu. I mean, Netanyahu is Israel and Israel is Netanyahu. To like, l'état c'est moi. Some people could think, and in the Arab world, they rarely remember other prime ministers in Israel. Netanyahu was a great statesman, and he actually led Israel through very hard years in the Second Intifada, to a large extent, through 8 years of a president in America, Barack Obama, who was not friendly with the party of Netanyahu, or the ideology which Netanyahu was leading, the Likud ideology. Barack Obama was much more comfortable with the Labour Party or with the liberal circles in Israel, and it was known that Netanyahu had to suffer for 8 years from the American president of those years. Of course, Barack Obama gave Israel very good support when it comes to the military support, but he had a very open quarrel with Netanyahu about Iran, to a degree that Netanyahu felt that he should go to the American Congress to speak to the Congress, in spite of the fact that Barack Obama did not, and he expressed his resentment vis-a-vis this act of Netanyahu very clearly. And Netanyahu did not listen to Obama, and he went to the Congress upon an invitation from the Congress, and he spoke to the Congress, and this created, or it widened the rift between Netanyahu and Obama, no doubt. And Netanyahu, in spite of this, was re-elected in Israel because most of the Israelis supported his standing fast or steadfastness vis-a-vis Obama. And he gained much support in Israel because of his courageous attitude to Obama, as many Israelis interpreted it and saw it. And I think that, people were saying those days that it is only one person in the whole world who is willing and able to disobey Obama, and this is Netanyahu. And it was rather correct to put him in such a description. Then he had Trump with much more sympathizing policies vis-a-vis the Middle East. He got out of the JCPOA with Iran, and he put sanctions on Iran. Definitely, very well going along with the Israeli policy and Netanyahu's policy. And Netanyahu was viewed through the 4 years of Trump as the Israeli hero who succeeded to gain the American support in such a way which nobody even dreamt in Israel. So definitely Netanyahu has very much, I would support in Israel because of his successes vis-a-vis America. Now to this you can add the successes with the Arab world, because within less than half a year, Israel had signed or almost signed peace agreements. Now, not only peace, normalization, which is way beyond peace, with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Sudan, with Morocco. We are used to have a peace with an Arab country once in 20 years, because we had one peace with Egypt in 1979, and another peace with Jordan in 1994, 15 years later. And here Netanyahu comes, and within 4 or 5 months, he brings peace with 4 Arab countries, and not only cold peace as it is between Israel and Egypt and Israel and Jordan, it is normalization, means with everything, tourism, research, art exchange, whatever you like, you name it. Okay, way beyond what we have with Egypt and Jordan. And this actually was attributed to Netanyahu, to his international skills and ability, no doubt. Having said that, domestically, Netanyahu was rather mediocre. First of all, when it comes to the court issues which he has, and I'm not willing to go into this, but to say the least, he was not careful. And Netanyahu knew very well that the prosecution is after him, that the left is after him, the media is after him, and they were all checking what he's doing and what he's not doing. And he was not careful in all kinds of things. He should have been much more careful in order not to give them ammunition to shoot at him. And he was not. This is one thing. Second thing, he had some problems in the Likud. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. He is a prime minister, very good prime minister. But whoever in the Likud tried to promote himself as some kind of future successor for Netanyahu, Netanyahu actually kicked him out. It was with Gideon Saar, who actually went home for a couple of years, stayed at home. He didn't come, he resigned from everything, because whenever he said something which promotes himself to be a potential successor in the future, when the term of Netanyahu will come to an end, and it will happen in a way or another, so he kicked him out. Another one, he sent him to be the ambassador in the United Nations, because he kicked him away to New York like a punishment, because he had some public posture. And this is how Netanyahu never trained, never nurtured any successor. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you very frankly, if I have let's say a firm, a company, which I'm running a company, I would like to know that the manager, who's working for me, has some kind of successor. If something happened to the manager, and the manager is 70 years old, things happen. Look at what happened to Chas v'Chalila. I'm not wishing anybody, but we had it with Ariel Sharon. He had a stroke when he was a prime minister. Somebody, let's say, breaks a leg. Somebody can have a heart attack. And God forbid, somebody could have a stroke. So a man who is responsible should have a successor, a potential successor. Not only this successor should be trained. He has to send him, go to this president, go to that prime minister, go do this, go do that, in order to prepare the potential successor to be a prime minister. And a responsible prime minister should prepare a successor out of responsibility, because things might happen. Nobody came to the world to stay here forever. Netanyahu never prepared any successor. And not only this, Netanyahu did not allow anybody to walk into the shoes of a potential successor. And this is something which, as a citizen who really thinks that Netanyahu is a great statesman, domestically, he had problems by not being careful vis-a-vis everybody who is looking after him to see what he's doing and what he's not doing. And this is actually what brought him to court, because he was not careful. He could have avoided it. Because believe me, these issues which he has to face in the court, except for one maybe, are minor issues which he could avoid easily. And of course, the fact that he did not prepare a successor. Some people accuse him, and I don't agree with this, but this is what people think in Israel, that he actually made some kind of a personal cult around him. It is not correct, but too many people in Israel say it. So what I'm saying is that as good as he was in the international arena as a statesman, in Israel as a politician, he had problems. And now those who support the right side of the political arena are torn between the support to Netanyahu as a great statesman, or to stop supporting him because of the problems on the domestic issue, on the domestic arena. For a couple of years, the statesman overshadowed the problems inside. But with the time, people from the right side of the political arena started to leave him and started to think that we have to go forward to the time beyond Netanyahu, after Netanyahu. And with this feeling, which became more and more in the Israeli right, Netanyahu turned little by little, turned from an asset to a burden. And this is how people from the hardcore of the Israeli right are talking today. Like Emuna Elon, who is one of the leaders of the people in Judea and Samaria. She wrote in Makor Rishon last week, Netanyahu, you are a great leader, but your time is over. I'm more than sure that she had great pains writing it. But when the reality is this, maybe this is the time. When if he withdrew from when he was on the peak, made it, but he's not in the peak anymore. He now in the slope down, and we hope that it's not so slippery. However, on the other side of the political map, on the left side, there is a whole mayhem turned that the blue and white party, the Gantz party, just blew up and nothing remained from this. And it is a party which brought more than a quarter of the Knesset, 35 Knesset members in the last elections. It was like a comet, went up very fast and went down as fast as it went up. And unfortunately, here in Israel, especially when it comes to the left, we have what we say fashion parties. Parties which are, fashion. Something which can last a year, 2 years, 3 years. And we have it time and again. We had Shinui, and we had the Reshima Demokratit. We had many parties in Israel because the left actually has lost its ideology. And look, once the left had the ideology of the socialism, but since the collapse of the Soviet Union 30 years ago, to present yourself as a socialist, maybe it can work in Vermont. It cannot work in Israel anymore. Okay? Socialism is associated in Israel with corruptness and the old Labor Party, which actually is totally dismantled. So, and the Histadrut, the worker union, doesn't have a good name in Israel because now everybody's in high tech, and the high tech is not organized. So the left actually lost its card of socialism, which it had for many years. The other card which the left had is the peace movement with the Palestinians. They actually were the Shalom Achshav and all these, the Meretz and all these organizations and parties, which actually was always behind the supporting the Palestinian issue. But during the last few years, especially since the rift between the Hamas and Fatah, and Hamas taking over Gaza, the peace with the Palestinians is something which is viewed as something totally impossible. With whom we're gonna make peace? With Mahmoud Abbas, who has nothing to say in Gaza? We'll make peace with Abbas. We'll give him a state, but Gaza will continue to shoot, to launch missiles at us. Is this a peace? Or especially recently, when Netanyahu succeeds to bring peace with all kinds of Arab countries, bypassing the Palestinians. So the main mantra of the left, that peace with the Palestinians is the condition for any peace with Arab countries, turned that it was a nonsense. We have peace with, not only peace, normalization with 4 Arab countries, and today the important countries, the Emirates especially, when all the other countries like Syria and Iraq and Libya and Yemen are sinking in a swamp of blood and then tears and fire, who remained in the Arab world? The Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, we have with her whatever we have. And the Emirates are normalizing with Israel, in spite of the fact that Israel has no yet permanent peace with the Palestinians. So even this claim of the Israeli left that peace with the Palestinians is a condition to anything else turned to be nothing. So actually these 2 cards, which the Israeli left was playing on through 70 years, 72 years, the labor unions and the socialism on one side, and the peace process with the Palestinians, these 2 cards flew in the wind. So what else the left has? Rak lo Bibi. Just get rid of Bibi. That is the only thing which the demonstrations of the left, especially in Balfour, in Jerusalem, Balfour in Jerusalem, this is what was left for them. And I would say no left, because the left has actually lost its agenda. And when they lose the agenda, now is the time to personal issues. Now you see all kinds of new comets. Since the comet of Gantz is now falling into the sea, Now we have Huldai, the mayor of Tel Aviv, and now we have others, all kinds of names, which will again go up like comet and fall down when everybody will see that they have no agenda, no ideology, because only not Bibi is not an ideology. This is a slogan, hollow slogan. And this is actually what we have today in Israel. On one side, you have ideology. The right has steady ideology of Eretz Israel Hashlema, to settle in Eretz Israel, to have peace with our neighbors. This is what today, I would say, defines the right side of the political arena. The left has no ideology, nothing left there. The only thing which the left might support is what happened in Israel in the recent, let's say, 25 years, since Aharon Barak, Professor Aharon Barak, became the president of the Supreme Court. He actually introduced, little by little, a whole revolution in Israel. And Israel today, or Israel was supposed to be a democracy. And a democracy, as you know, has three authorities: legislative, executive, and judicial authorities. And these authorities should be separate. And you call it separation of authorities. Chalukat Rashuyot, as it is in Hebrew. And the legislative has to make laws, the executive has to execute those laws, and the judicial system is the court system. What happened in Israel is that little by little, the court system became above the Knesset and above the government. And today, the Supreme Court, only last week, exactly a week ago, the Supreme Court discussed whether the constitutional law in Israel is legal or not. This is something unprecedented that the Supreme Court actually dares to sit above the Knesset and to tell the Knesset that we now, the court, are going to discuss your basic law. Basic law in Israel is what we have instead of constitution. We don't have full constitution, we have a series of 8 basic laws. And the basic laws is actually the constitution. The court, without any authorization, allows itself for many years to cancel laws of the Knesset, and now, since a week ago, to discuss the legality of a basic law. And this is actually the judicial revolution which Aharon Barak introduced, and the Israeli left actually supports it. The right is against it because the Supreme Court is a bunch of ultra-leftist, ultra-liberal, unlike the Supreme Court in the United States. Here in Israel, the Supreme Court is chaver mevi chaver, means a man brings his friend. They don't allow anyone who doesn't think like them to come into the Supreme Court, to become a Supreme Judge. And this is why the Supreme Court perpetuates itself as a bastion of leftist agenda, which took over the Knesset and the government. And this is, in my view, the main problem of Israel, because Israel is not a democracy anymore. Israel is some kind of a government or a state ruled by a junta of ultra-leftists who impose their agenda through the judicial system, through the legal advisors, which are working according to their dictates. They are ruling everybody. They are ruling the ministries, they are ruling the ministers, they are ruling the government, they are ruling the Knesset, they are ruling the municipalities, they are ruling everywhere. And the question is, until when the Knesset will surrender to such a court? We hope that in the next elections, the shape of the Knesset will be able to legislate laws which will make sure the Supreme Court is parallel to the court system, is parallel to the Knesset and the government, and not above them. And the Knesset will need courage to act against 25 years of the heritage of Aaron Barak. Today we are in the right. We are much more aware of this situation, and we are much more worried because of this situation, because we see the consequences of this situation where the Supreme Court is ruled by an ultra-leftist agenda, which fails again and again in the Knesset, but controls the country through the Supreme Court. This is something which Israel invented, a kind of a country which makes face as if it is a democracy, while it is an oligarchy of ultra-leftist group of 15 people who are sitting there and allow themselves, without any law which allows it, allow themselves to run the country through their judgments. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'll stop here and I'll take questions, because I feel that there are many questions, and that's actually what I want to say. The elections will be in Israel in March, and every day until March we have news about more people are running to politics, more people are running away from politics, and no dull moment here in Israel because of this. And let's hope that our parties in the future will know how to run the country in a better way, and will make the country a democracy again. Thank you so much, Judy, and everybody else who took part in arranging this webinar. And I think I'll take the questions.
Okay, Helene, I think you should have the first few questions, and then I will pick it up. Helene?
You're muted. There you go.
Did I go up? There. I've been getting a lot of questions. First, I wanted to thank you, Dr. Kedar. You always bring so much to the table every time you speak. I am trying to get to, here we go. So there are a lot of questions. A lot of questions have been very similar from different people, but along the same lines. So I think I'm going to start with the political ones, because the political landscape, and then there's a whole slew of questions about the Abraham Accords. So with regard to the next Israeli government, here we have Andrea Spindle asks that in 2012,
she's from Toronto.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, she's from Toronto. She's a great lady.
She's on. She's going to be thrilled that you said that. But she points out that in 2012, the Department of State reported that there were less than 30,000 Arab Palestinian refugees when you use the same definitions that we use for the rest of the world. So she wants to know, why has Israel been lax in publicizing this, and will the new government have the ability or the desire to pressure the US, the EU, and others to stop funding UNRWA?
Well, this is the question. Why Israel keeps allowing or even keeps asking countries to support UNRWA, although UNRWA is an organization which perpetuates the problem with the Palestinians rather than solving it. And here we come to some characteristic of the Israeli politics. Israeli politicians work, their agenda actually ends in the next elections. What they want to do is actually pass the next elections in a good shape. This is how long or their horizon ends in the next elections, or to pass the next elections. UNRWA is a problem very long time, since 1948, and they take care of the Palestinian refugees or people who live in the refugee camps in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, and other places in the world. Israeli government or Israeli politician does not want to face the situation that he has to take care of those refugees or those people. If UNRWA is being dismantled and defunded totally, Israel will have to, at least partially, to start relating to the refugee problem, because many of them live in Judea and Samaria, in some 7 refugee camps, and in Gaza. Okay, Gaza, we got out of Gaza, but in Judea and Samaria, we are there. So no Israeli politician wants by himself to start taking care of these refugees. He would rather have the world and the American taxpayer pay for this problem. Let's deal with this in the future after the next elections. He doesn't want to do it in his term right now. So their horizon actually ends at the end of the nose. So this is why they are working on the short-term issues rather than investing time and thought in the long-term issues like the Palestinian refugees. Definitely. And this is something which here in Israel we find too much. Sometimes we do see things which show that some ministers look at the far horizon, like what happened with Israel Katz, the Minister of Transportation, who promoted the Israeli road system and railway system in a way which definitely shows that the man looks forward 15 or 20 years, which is not typical to the Israeli politicians. This is why we leave UNRWA, because we don't want to take care of these people today.
Okay, let's see. I have things flashing across the screen that I'm not expecting. All right, so going directly to the politics. First, several people, I should tell you, asked why you won't please become the prime minister and take care of everything properly. But several people have asked, who do you think, you know, and I'm going to go through a bunch of questions because I think you can answer them all at once. Who do you think should replace Netanyahu? Why do you think Netanyahu failed to groom a successor? And do you think that the courts and the media specifically targeted Netanyahu to bring him down? And finally, why does the Israeli public allow the court to perpetuate itself in this way?
Well, the last question is a bit different, so I'll start with this. The Israeli people have no say, unfortunately. Look, in the States, when you go to vote, you vote for your president, you vote for a congressman, senator, I think judges as well. Every state has its own rules, but you have a long long sheet of paper in order to answer all these people who you are voting for, including the president, as much as I know. Here in Israel, we the citizens do not vote for the court. The court is being nominated, or the judges are being nominated by a committee. And the committee is made of judges, the bar of the lawyers, Knesset, and the government. Means all have their own agenda. The number of judges in this committee makes it impossible to elect somebody who is refused by the judges. So they actually control this committee. So I, as a citizen, have no say because I'm not voting for judges. And the committee which elects the judges is controlled by the judges. So this is why they perpetuate itself. So this is why we as citizens don't have much to say about this. Now, about Netanyahu, as I said, for his own reasons, which I have no idea what his reasons were, he never allowed or never let anybody to come to a position that he can challenge his leadership. Whether it was his wife, whether it was himself, I have no idea. Oh, look, I think that, and Bar-Ilan wrote that great leaders, in many cases in history, tend to think that they are irreplaceable because they are great leaders. And apparently, Netanyahu, and look, I never interviewed him on my coach, but apparently he thinks that he is irreplaceable. This is why he never let anyone to come to a position from which he can replace Netanyahu. So this is apparently what his mindset. Look, he never talked about this. He never answered any question about this.
I don't know.
But you can see how he acted through many years. Whoever approached his level was kicked away. Dani Danon to New York to be the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. Gideon Saar was kicked home. So, and some others as well. So, apparently Netanyahu thinks that he is irreplaceable. Okay, I personally think, as we say in Hebrew, that the cemeteries are full of people who are irreplaceable or indispensable. Okay, everyone has the end of his irreplaceability, so to say. And it's maybe time has come. I don't know.
Mordechai, Robert Seedy asked an interesting question. I think it's on a lot of people's minds.
Robert Seedy is from New York, as much as I remember.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. You have a great memory.
He also echoes a number of other questions.
Oh,
Judy,
I didn't know
Judy,
whether you were getting them.
Don't say that I have good memory, because 45 years ago, I forgot to bring the ring to the wedding party. And my wife, until this very day, she never forgot and never forgave me.
I think she's forgiven you. I think so.
I'm sure you paid up for that one.
No, she
Okay,
keeps it
so
alive. So I
have
paid more and more.
I have questions from Joseph Flashner, Andrea Spindle, Albert Kreminitzer, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, and Robert City. So what they're asking about is the downside to the Abraham Accords for not only the country itself, but also for the people. So the question is, how long will Israel delay declaring sovereignty? How will Israel offset the danger of heavy Arab investments, especially in infrastructure, like we see with the Haifa port right now? I think you covered everybody right there.
Right. First of all, about investments. Let me tell you something. It will cost you something like $100 to establish a company in Italy or in Greece, through which every billionaire from the Gulf could buy Israel time and again. Means the fact that we have now peace or the peace accords with the Emirates does not make it all of a sudden possible for them to buy Israel. They could do it years and years ago, because they could do it through other parties, through Europe, through all kinds of countries, or through the States. Okay, establishing. So this is not news. This is one thing. Second thing, about the sovereignty. Look, I think that Israel should have declared sovereignty long ago. By the way, I don't think that the deal of the century, which Trump came with, is a good deal at all. I think that we should follow the Palestinian Emirates solution, which I came out with, but this is not the time to talk about this. However, and the Emirate solution actually says that Israel has the sovereignty over most part of Judea and Samaria, way more than what the government wants or wanted. So from my point of view, sovereignty should be implemented, Israeli sovereignty on Judea and Samaria long ago. However, since Israel promised those Arab countries that Israel will postpone for a while, I don't remember how much, maybe year, 2 years, 3, 4 years, I don't know, postpone the sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, Israel should keep its word. Because here in the Middle East, and in other parts of the world as well, but here especially, people, if you cheat once, this is the end of you. Nobody will accept you anymore. You are gone. So if Israel wants to be viewed as a reliable country, Israel has to behave according to Israel's commitments. I don't like these commitments, but after these commitments were made by Netanyahu, Israel should keep them very, very strictly, because Israel's credibility is the most important weapon which we have in our hand. Without credibility, we are nothing. Why? If Israel says to any Arab or Islamic country like Iran, be very careful because we are going to do A, B, or C to you, without credibility, nobody will take Israel seriously. Israel must be viewed as the most credible state in the Middle East, because credibility is our power. Otherwise, people will laugh at us. Therefore, Israel, in order to keep and to maintain and to strengthen its credibility, Israel must stand to its commitments. Having said that, I personally think that these Abraham Accords, and I'm fully in support of these accords, I think that one single missile, Iranian missile, which will fall in the Abu Dhabi desert and kill one ant, will bring these accords to their end. Why? Saudi Arabia, a country which everybody thought that it will join the Abraham Accords, does not join the Accords. Why? And believe me, Israel has with Saudi Arabia way much more than Israel had with the Emirates or with Bahrain. And I will not disclose what Israel has with Saudi Arabia. Yet, Saudi Arabia has not yet come to the point where it says out loud that it goes for peace with Israel. Why? The answer is very clear. In one night, September 15, 2019, a year and 3 months ago, Iran attacked the facilities of Aramco, the American and Saudi Arabic company, and destroyed within one night some 50% of the oil export ability of Saudi Arabia. Within one night, without any warning, without any notice, without anything. Nobody, neither the Americans nor the Israelis, especially not the Saudis, nobody knew about this in advance. And when people analyzed the hits on these facilities, many jaws fell down in the Middle East and beyond the Middle East, in Langley as well. Because the hits of the Iranian missiles on these facilities were precise, way much more than what the Israeli and the American and other intelligence organizations knew about the ability of the Iranians. Saudi Arabia suffered a lot from this. For more than a month, their export of oil was reduced by 50%. 50%. No country retaliated, neither the United States nor Israel, especially not Saudi Arabia. Iran came out from this hit without any problem. Saudi Arabia learned the lesson. And Saudi Arabia is rather reluctant in running forward with Israel into this peace agreement. Whatever Saudi Arabia is doing is behind the scenes, in order not to make the Iranians too angry at them. Ladies and gentlemen, one single Iranian missile, which will not hit anything, only one poor ant in the Abu Dhabi desert, will be enough to hint to the Saudis, to the Emiratis, that they went too much forward with Israel. And the Iranians do not like it. I'm afraid that if this happens, much of what was signed between Israel and the Emirates and Bahrain as well will be frozen, will be halted, maybe canceled as well. Okay? So, and nobody will do anything to Iran, because Iran will not kill anyone by launching that single missile to the Abu Dhabi desert. Okay? So things are reversible. Things are fragile in the Middle East. And as I wrote in one of my articles, politics in the Middle East is built on sand dunes. And sand dunes are changing their shape according to what we say in Hebrew, matzav haruach. Matzav haruach means in Hebrew the position of the wind, but it's also the mood. Means the Middle Eastern politics are rather changeable, reversible, fragile. So Israel should not pay with hard currency for achievements with Arab countries. Definitely not withdrawal. If these countries freeze their or reduce their relations with Israel because of that single missile which might fall on the Abu Dhabi desert, then Israel will be liberated from its commitments regarding the sovereignty. Okay? Things are interconnected, no doubt.
I think I'm still up. Do we still have some more time? Because we're hitting that 1 o'clock, that 2 o'clock.
I am yours.
We actually scheduled this because we know Mordechai has so much to say. We scheduled it for an extra 15 minutes. So
Okay.
if you have more questions, Helene.
Yeah, they've been coming in like
know,
crazy. So I am looking at.
Well, can I just ask one thing while you're looking? Do you think that the Abraham Accords will have any effect on the Israeli Arabs? Do you think that it'll make them feel any better towards the Israeli government, or nothing?
Well, the Israeli Arabs definitely go through a very interesting process. It's not because of the Abraham Accords. It's mainly because of the Arab Spring, or the so-called Arab Spring, which started 10 years ago exactly. During this time, they realized that Israel is the best choice for them to live in. Way much better than their Arab brothers in Syria, in Iraq, even in Jordan, in Yemen, of course, in Libya. The Arab world today is a mayhem. And to identify themselves with the Arab world, or with the Arab agenda, or the Arabism in general, is actually something which doesn't work in their interests. They are sick of the agonies of the Arab world. They are sick of the quarrels and the fights and the wars. And in addition, they are sick already also from the Palestinian problem, the rift between Fatah and Hamas, the corruption, and the fact that the Palestinian state doesn't actually become something real. They are disappointed. And the more disappointed they are with the Arabs and the Palestinians, they understand that they live inside Israel. And recently I even heard, as you might know, the Arab parties are definitely against the basic law of the Israel, the nation state law. Because Israel, this law mentions that, or says clearly, that Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people only. Recently, I heard Arabs start saying that Israel is a democracy because Israel is a Jewish state. Means the more Jewish Israel is, the more democratic it is. And therefore, our life will be better, or in a state which is a Jewish state. And their objection to the state basic law is little, means becomes smaller and smaller. You can hear more and more Arabs, Muslims, not only Druze who serve in the army, Muslims who keep saying, leave us from the Arab world. What do you want? We are Israeli citizens. We want to be Israeli citizens. We want to identify with the country. Of course, they don't yet sing the Hatikva, with full lungs, okay? Because it says Nefesh Yehudi Homia, means a soul of a Jew. Yet, their willingness to live, normal life in Israel is way much better, much more powerful than it was until 10 years ago. What brought the change is the Arab Spring. And now the peace with the Emirates, let it be. They can enjoy it. Look, if the Israeli economy becomes better because of this peace, they will enjoy it as well. because they are part of the Israeli economy and they know it. So, yeah, yes, you can very, very easily see today Arabs, Muslims who recently, as you know, Netanyahu has a new friend named Mansour Abbas, a Knesset member from the Islamic movement, from the Muslim Brotherhood.
I read about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And he became, buddy of Netanyahu. Of course, there are reasons. It's not without reasons. And maybe in order to keep the Hamas regime in Gaza, because if the left comes to power in Israel, the left will re-empower Mahmoud Abbas on the expense of Gaza, of Hamas. And Netanyahu worked for Hamas for a long time, allowed Qatar bring who knows how many hundreds of millions of dollars to Gaza. So for Mansour Abbas, who identifies definitely with Hamas because he's a Muslim Brotherhood, for him Netanyahu is the best deal. Some things sound weird, but this is the situation is.
So
Elaine?
with that, I'm going to ask, I think probably the last question, which is, who would you pick for the next prime minister, given the multitude of parties? And with that, people have actually asked about, is there a way to limit the number of parties and how that would play out? So I think a little bit of explanation on Israeli politics specifically, and then the real question, who would you choose?
Okay. Today, already in Israel, people understand that the struggle will not be between the left and the right. It will be between the right and the right. Means it will be between, maybe personally, between Gideon Sa'ar, who left the Likud and shaped another party, and this party might be almost as big as the Likud, and Naftali Bennett, who until recently was mentioned as the potential substitute for Netanyahu. And now the big question is, Netanyahu will run again. I don't know if he'll run again. Look, we have 3 months, almost 3 months until the elections. Things might change. So if Netanyahu is running, most probably he will be the next prime minister, pending his judicial issues, in the court. But definitely he will have to give good part in the government to Gideon Sa'ar and to Naftali Bennett. And I think that together, the Likud and the Yamina of Bennett and Tikva Hadasha of Gideon Sa'ar, maybe within one more party of the Haredim, will have a majority in the Knesset. So if this will be the next map after the elections, Netanyahu will not be able to kick out Sa'ar or Bennett, as he did so far, because so far he could manage without them. If they run and they win, means they gain enough seats in the Knesset, he will not be able to shape any government without them. So they will be the potential successors for Netanyahu. Look, both Sa'ar and Bennett could fit the prime minister, could be prime minister. Both are experienced in politics. Both are experienced in international relations, and both are good people from the right side of the political map. Personally, look, I'm not hiding. I support Bennett. He actually wanted me to run as a Knesset member. Already twice he suggested. I refused for personal reasons. But I'm out of the closet in this issue that I support Naftali Bennett. But, Sa'ar is good as well. I'm not trying to say that Naftali Bennett is the savior of Israel, because, as I said, cemeteries are full of people who are indispensable.
Just one quick question. From those of us in the States who feel that perhaps we don't have systems in place to keep our elections honest, what does Israel have in place to keep your elections honest and above board?
Well, first of all, we don't use the mail, because as much as I understood, the sending the ballots through the mail was the biggest problem, because you never see who is voting and whatever. We don't use it. And we have 1 day of voting, and you have to come personally. The voter has to come personally with an identity card to the voting place and to put it. It's very hard to forge the elections. Although, once I think Stalin said once that it doesn't matter who vote. What matters is who counts the votes. Okay? And here problems might be. But we are aware of this problem. And in every voting place, voting center, there are representatives of all the parties. And they are keeping their eyes open on everybody. And now we are going to have cameras as well. Everything will be recorded. Opening the boxes and counting the ptakim, the votes. So we do have a much more reliable system, because we don't use computers, because the system is so backwarded. We use papers.
Piece of paper, right?
Piece of paper, yes. Since it's so backwarded, it's much safer. We don't use servers in Frankfurt, and we don't use any mailman who might be, working for somebody for money or not for money. So
It's nice to have a small population for that kind of thing, but
no, it doesn't matter. Look, the United States could have the same system as Israel. It doesn't matter. The size doesn't matter here. What matters is look. You know why the mail became a way to vote in the States?
well,
Because
supposedly it was COVID.
no, the mail was years ago. It's not a new thing.
Right, but to a very lesser extent, you had to show real need. Now it was they just mailed it out for COVID.
Okay, now in the COVID, we're going to have voting centers of people who are sick, like drive-in. So they stay in the car and they vote from the car. Okay, and now we're working on it. But again, you need to use a piece of paper, and this is much safer. It might be not so sophisticated. By the way, Israel, what now we have, since Israel is a closed system, we don't have open borders with our neighbors, and we have only one international airport. Israel succeeded so far to vaccine, I think, 15% of its population. Pfizer gave us as many ampoules as we asked. You know why? Because we are like a laboratory for Pfizer. Because Israel, the health system is very organized. The Kupot Cholim, the organizations which take care of the population, we have only 3 or 4. They are highly organized. They know what they do. And Pfizer knew that here the system can be, the vaccine can be checked because the system knows what it does. And this is the good system in Israel. Even Pollard came to Israel last night.
Yes.
And I believe that his wife, as you know, she's not well.
Yes, I know.
She's sick. I believe that the Israeli health system is already getting ready to, maybe it is already ready to take care of her. They know whatever they have to know. They got whatever they have to get. And they will continue treating her as good as they can, as well as they can. And okay, because the Israeli health system, of course, it's not without problems, but it is very efficient and I would say rather good. This is why Pfizer give us as much, because they are looking at the results here in Israel. And the readiness of people to get vaccinated is way beyond many others in Europe, and I think in America as well. People here are standing in line.
And we wish you health, and we hope that we can get back to Israel as soon as possible.
So before I turn the mic back over to you, Judy, to close the meeting, thank you again, Dr. Kedar. On behalf of AFSI, I want to wish everybody a happy, healthy, and successful 2021. I think that was a good ending point to see that we're getting, hopefully the vaccination is successful. So thank everybody for their support throughout the year. Contributions are the only way that organizations like AFSI can continue to work. So if you have not made your donation yet and you were thinking about it, I just want to remind you that there are only 2 days left if you wanted to count for the 2020 taxes. There are also 2 specific projects that honor the late beloved former executive director, Helen Friedman. From my person to all of you, be well, stay safe. Judy.
Elaine, you did that so beautifully. There's very little to add other than thanking everybody who's here today. And of course, Mordechai Kedar, for your illuminating discussion. We thank you so much for being with us, and we hope to do it again soon.
Thank you so much, Judy, and see you all. ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.